The night it all started, I wasn't even supposed to be home. That was the first twist. I had a work trip scheduled. 3 days out of town, meetings, networking, the usual corporate nonsense. Emily kissed me goodbye that morning like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't already making plans the second I walked out the door. I was halfway to the airport when I got an email that changed everything. A freak storm had grounded all outbound flights for the next 24 hours. I was annoyed at first, but now I thank whatever force in the universe made that storm happen. I turned the car around and headed home, thinking I'd surprise her. Maybe take her out to dinner, spend some time together. Stupid, right? I was still that guy, the idiot who thought his wife would be happy to see him. I parked down the street, not in our driveway. No reason, just a weird impulse. Maybe some part of me already knew. As I walked up to the house, I noticed something immediately. The lights were off in the living room, but there was a glow coming from our bedroom window. And then voices. My stomach twisted in a way I'd never felt before. It wasn't panic. Not yet. Just confusion. I stood there for a second, listening. I could hear her voice. And then a man's. I don't remember opening the door. I don't remember walking inside. But suddenly, I was there, standing in the hallway, staring at our half-closed bedroom door. I pushed it open without thinking. Emily was in bed, sheets barely covering her. And next to her, my boss, Mark F*** G. Reynolds. He wasn't just my boss. He was my mentor, the guy who gave me my first big opportunity, the guy who shook my hand at our wedding and told me I was a lucky man. And now, here he was, lying in my bed like he belonged there. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was like time froze. Then Emily's eyes went wide, and she shot up. Pulling the sheet around herself like that would somehow fix this. "What are you doing here?" she blurted out. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I can explain." Just "what are you doing here?" Mark sat up slower, rubbing his face like I was inconveniencing him. Like I was the problem. Like I was the intruder. And that's when something inside me snapped. I don't remember deciding to move. But suddenly I was across the room. My fist connected with Mark's jaw before I even registered throwing the punch. The impact sent him tumbling off the bed, hitting the nightstand with a satisfying crash. The lamp shattered. Emily screamed. Mark groaned, clutching his face. "Jesus Christ, man." I grabbed him by the collar, yanking him up. "Get the hell out of my house." My voice didn't sound like my own. It was low, steady, too calm for what I was feeling. Emily scrambled off the bed, the sheet wrapped around her like some pathetic attempt at modesty. "Stop it. Just stop." I ignored her, shoving Mark toward the door. He stumbled, still dazed, but had the audacity to glare at me like I was the one out of line. "Listen, let's be adults about this." I didn't let him finish. My hands slammed into his chest, sending him staggering backward out of the bedroom. He tripped over his own pants, still pooled around his ankles, and nearly fell. Emily darted forward, grabbing my arm. "Stop. Just listen to me." I turned on her so fast she flinched. "Listen to what, Emily?" "Huh." My chest was heaving. My hands were shaking. I was seconds away from losing control completely. "Do you actually have an explanation that makes this okay?" Her mouth opened, then shut. Mark, the spineless coward, took that as his cue to run. He yanked up his pants and bolted down the hallway like a rat escaping a sinking ship. A few seconds later, the front door slammed, and then it was just us. Emily stood there, her hair a mess, her face pale. I laughed. Actually laughed. It was short, bitter. "Go ahead. Say it. Tell me it's not what it looks like." She hesitated. And then, in the most disgustingly casual voice, she said, "It didn't mean anything. I saw red." "Oh, well, that makes it fine then." I threw my hands in the air. "You just happened to trip and fall into my boss' lap? No big deal, right?" Emily's face twisted. "You don't understand." "I don't understand?" My voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "I caught you in our bed with another man. What part am I misunderstanding?" She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes like I was being unreasonable. "You weren't supposed to be home." I froze. My skin went ice cold. "What the hell does that mean?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Emily crossed her arms, the sheet slipping slightly. I mean, this wouldn't have happened if you hadn't come back early. I took a step back, staring at her like I was seeing her for the first time. Are you actually blaming me for catching you cheating? She huffed. I'm just saying, if you'd been on your trip like you were supposed to be, this wouldn't be an issue. There it was. The moment I realized there was nothing left to salvage. Not a single piece of the woman I thought I knew remained. I had loved this person, built a life with her, and here she was, standing in front of me, acting like I was the problem. I exhaled slowly, the last shred of my patience slipping away. You're disgusting, I said, my voice quiet but firm. And you're done. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I turned away, already heading for the door. It means I'm divorcing you. And for the first time that night, Emily panicked. Her expression shifted in an instant. The arrogance, the indifference. It shattered like glass, replaced by something I hadn't seen in a long time. Fear. Real gut-deep fear. You're what? She snapped. Like she hadn't heard me right. I didn't answer. I was already grabbing my suitcase from the closet, yanking open drawers, throwing my essentials into the bag. My movements were quick, precise, fueled by the kind of adrenaline that makes your hands work faster than your brain. Get out. Get out now. Emily rushed forward, grabbing my arm. No, you're not leaving. I turned to her, yanking free from her grip. You think you get a say in this? I let out a sharp laugh. You just got caught screwing my boss, Emily. You don't get to act like I owe you anything. She stepped in front of the door, blocking my way. You're overreacting, she hissed. It was one time. I stared at her, stunned at how effortlessly she could lie. One time, I echoed. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes darting just a fraction to the left. A tell. She was scrambling. Yeah, she said quickly. It was a mistake. I tilted my head, studying her. Then tell me something, I said, keeping my voice calm. If it was just once, why did you say I wasn't supposed to be home? Her entire face went stiff. Got you. I took a step forward, invading her space, watching her squirm. See, if it was just one time, you wouldn't have said that. You would have been shocked, guilty, something. But instead, the first thing you did was act like this was my fault for coming back early. Which means this isn't new, is it? Emily swallowed hard. I nodded slowly. How long? She shook her head. It doesn't matter. How long? I repeated, my voice sharp. Her eyes flickered with something ugly. Defiance. I knew the answer before she even spoke. 6 months, she said, her voice flat, like she was telling me what we were having for dinner. 6 months. I let out a breath, stepping back. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even shocked. I was done. Emily saw it, felt it, and that's when the real panic kicked in. Wait, she said, grabbing my wrist again, this time tighter. Listen, we can fix this. I pulled free without hesitation. There's nothing to fix. Her face twisted. You're not leaving. I zipped up my bag. Watch me. And then she did something I never expected. She slapped herself, right across the face, hard enough to leave a red mark. Then she screamed. The sound jolted through me like an electric shock. I stared at her, my brain scrambling to process what I had just seen. She clutched her cheek, breathing heavily, eyes glistening with crocodile tears. And then she looked at me like she was afraid, like she was a victim. My blood turned to ice. Are you out of your damn mind? I whispered. She took a shaky breath. You. Her voice wavered, her hands trembling. You hit me. I froze. It took me half a second too long to understand. And in that half second, I realized exactly what she was doing. I took a slow step back. You're trying to set me up. She sniffled. I don't know why you got so mad. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I grabbed my bag, shoved past her, and walked out. I wasn't going to spend one more second in a house with someone who would lie about something like that. As I stepped outside, my mind was racing. I had to be smart about this. I had to be careful. Emily wasn't just a liar. She was dangerous. And something told me she wasn't done yet, that I barely made it to my car before my phone started ringing. I didn't even have to look. I already knew who it was. Emily. I let it buzz in my pocket as I threw my bag in the passenger seat and got in. My hands gripped the wheel, but I didn't start the car right away. My heart was pounding. Not from anger anymore, but from something worse. Pure, cold realization. Emily had just tried to frame me. Not beg. Not apologize. Not even lie her way out of it properly. She had jumped straight to something that could have ruined my life. And the scariest part? She hadn't hesitated. I took a shaky breath and pulled out my phone. Still ringing. I declined the call, then blocked her number. A second later, another call came through, from a different number. She was using some app to call from random lines. I blocked that one too. Then I put my phone on airplane mode. I had to get away. Now, I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, my mind racing a mile a minute. What was she doing right now? Calling the police? Crying to her friends? Coming up with some new lie? No, she wouldn't go that far. Not yet, because Emily wasn't done with me. She had spent 6 months sneaking around with Mark. That wasn't just an affair, that was a long-term con job. And women like Emily, they don't just let go. She'd fight. She'd twist things. She'd make herself the victim. She'd make my life hell. But I wasn't going to give her the chance. I pulled onto the highway, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I needed a plan, somewhere to go, someone to call. But before I could figure out my next move, my phone lit up with a text. One that came through my car's Bluetooth, overriding airplane mode. Mark Reynolds, we need to talk. Now, I let out a slow breath, my grip tightening. Oh, you want to talk now, Mark? After I caught you in bed with my wife? I should have ignored it, driven until I was far away from both of them. But something about that message felt wrong. Mark wasn't the kind of guy to reach out after getting caught. He should have been running for cover, not demanding a conversation. My gut told me one thing. This wasn't over. Not even close. I pulled into an empty parking lot and stared at Mark's message, my thumb hovering over the screen. We need to talk. Now, what the hell did he want? An apology? A bribe to keep quiet? Maybe he thought I was about to march into the office and expose him. Good. He should be worried. I cracked my neck and took a slow breath. Every logical part of my brain told me to ignore him. But something about the way he sent it, so urgent, so demanding, didn't sit right with me. Against my better judgment, I tapped the call button. Mark picked up on the first ring. Where are you? His voice was sharp, low. No fake charm, no corporate professionalism. I smirked. Why? You want to finish what we started? Listen to me, he snapped. Emily called me. She's going to the police. Silence. A slow, heavy silence that pressed down on my chest like a brick. I blinked. What? She said you attacked her. She's filing a report. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. Are you kidding me? I wish I was. Mark let out a tight breath. She's saying you hit her. That you lost control. My entire body went rigid. My grip on the phone tightened. That's a goddamn lie, and you know it. I do. His voice was eerily calm. But nobody else will. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing myself to think. This wasn't some wild accusation, this was calculated. Emily hadn't panicked and blurted out a lie. No, this was planned. She knew exactly what she was doing. She set the stage. The red mark on her cheek, the fake tears, the way she acted so shocked and afraid when I left. She was trying to make me look like a violent husband. My pulse pounded in my ears. She wouldn't. She already did. Mark's voice was clipped. She called me right after you left. Said she was scared for her life. I almost laughed at the insanity of it. Scared for her life? The same woman who had just been rolling her eyes at me? The same woman who had spent 6 months screwing my boss behind my back? Why the hell are you telling me this? I asked. A beat of silence. Then something I didn't expect. I don't want this to get messy, Mark said. His voice had an edge, something that sounded almost nervous. I frowned. That wasn't like him. Mark was a cocky bastard. Always in control, always a step ahead. But now, he sounded like a man who just realized he was in way over his head. I leaned back in my seat. Messy for who? Both of us, he said quickly. Look, you leave town for a bit. Let things cool off and maybe... I scoffed. You want me to disappear? I want this whole thing to go away. His voice tightened. You're not thinking clearly, man. You just caught your wife cheating. The cops are gonna believe her when she says you snapped. Especially if you're still in town when they show up. I inhaled sharply. I hated that he was right. I was a man. A husband who just found out his wife was unfaithful. If she played the victim right, which I had no doubt she would, I was screwed. A nasty realization sank in. Emily wasn't just trying to punish me. She was trying to make sure she walked away clean. She knew a divorce would ruin her. The house? Mine. Our assets? Mostly mine. The prenup we signed? Very much in my favor. But if I got arrested? If she turned this into a case of domestic abuse? She'd walk away with everything. Mark cleared his throat. Look, just get out of town. Okay? Let this blow over. I exhaled slowly. And if I don't? Another pause. Then lower. Then I can't help you. I smirked. You're not trying to help me, Mark. And then I hung up. I sat there, gripping the wheel, my mind spinning. I had two choices. Run or fight. And something in my gut told me that Emily wasn't done playing her game yet, that I sat there for what felt like forever. The weight of everything pressing down on me. Emily wasn't just getting back at me. She was erasing me. This wasn't some heat-of-the-moment betrayal. No, she had thought this through. She had a plan. And that scared the hell out of me. I had to move. Now, I started the car and pulled onto the highway, but I wasn't running. No, I had made my decision. If Emily wanted to play dirty, she was about to learn that I could, too. First stop, my lawyer. I called ahead, and by the time I arrived at his office, Dan, a no-nonsense, shark-in-a-suit kind of guy, was already waiting for me. I told him everything. The affair, the setup, the fake abuse claim. Dan leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. You have evidence? I exhaled sharply. I have my word. His brow lifted slightly. That's not enough. If she's already calling the police, you need something concrete to counter her claims. I clenched my jaw. He was right. Without proof, Emily could spin this any way she wanted. And the courts? They'd believe her. Dan sighed, rubbing his temple. All right, first thing, do not go home. If she calls the cops and you're still in that house, things could get ugly. Fast. I already left. Good. Now, do you have access to any security footage? Cameras? Text messages? That's when it hit me. My house had smart home security. Emily never paid attention to it because I was the one who set it up. But I had remote access. I pulled out my phone, fingers flying across the screen, logged into the system, scrolled through the footage. And there it was. I tapped a video from 40 minutes ago, just after I left. Emily standing in the living room, phone pressed to her ear. I don't care, she snapped. I'm saying he hit me. That's what they need to hear. My blood turned ice cold. Dan leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Play that again. I did. She was pacing, voice sharp, eyes burning with determination. It doesn't matter what really happened, she said. Mark, are you listening? If I tell them I was afraid for my life, they'll believe me. I need you to back me up on this. Dan let out a slow breath, sitting back. Well, that's damning. I swallowed hard. So, what now? Dan tapped his pen on the desk. Now, we take this straight to the cops. Before she does. Adrenaline surged through me. I had walked in here as a man being hunted. Now, I had the bulletproof vest. Emily thought she was smart. She thought she could outplay me. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. Dan didn't waste a second. He grabbed his phone and called a police contact he knew, keeping his voice calm and controlled. Meanwhile, I just sat there, staring at my phone screen, replaying Emily's voice over and over in my head. I don't care. I'm saying he hit me. That's what they need to hear. I had proof. Proof that she was setting me up. Proof that she was trying to ruin my life. And yet, I still didn't feel safe. Because Emily wasn't the type to give up. She already called them, I muttered, rubbing my temple. She's setting the narrative first. Dan hung up his call and nodded. Yeah, but that video? He pointed at my phone. That's a sledgehammer to her narrative. You're not gonna be the one in cuffs tonight. I swallowed hard. You sure? Trust me. I wanted to. I really did. But I had seen too many men like me, Guys who got railroaded by a system that always took the woman's word first. But I had no choice. I had to see this through. We drove straight to the police station. The entire time, my knee bounced like a jackhammer. I was trying to keep my head clear, but my emotions were all over the place. Rage, betrayal, fear, disbelief that this was even happening. How the hell did I end up here? When we walked inside, the receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" Dan stepped forward, all business. "My client needs to file a report regarding a false accusation of domestic abuse." That got her attention. She glanced at me, then back at Dan. One moment. Minutes later, we were sitting in a small, windowless room with Detective Harris, a gruff-looking guy in his late 40s who had the tired expression of someone who had seen too much of this kind of thing. "All right," he said, folding his arms. "Talk to me." Dan nodded at me. "Show him." I pulled out my phone, hands slightly shaky, and pressed play. Emily's voice filled the room. Cold. Calculated. "I don't care. I'm saying he hit me. That's what they need to hear." Harris listened without saying a word. When it ended, he leaned back in his chair and let out a slow exhale. "Well, that's something." I clenched my fists. "That's proof she's lying." "It's proof she was planning to lie," he corrected. "But we still need to handle this carefully." I frowned. "What do you mean? Isn't this open and shut?" Harris rubbed his jaw. "Your wife's already made her report." My stomach dropped. "What?" He sighed. "She came in about 20 minutes ago, said you assaulted her, left her in fear for her life, had red marks on her cheek, crying. Pretty convincing act." I shot up from my chair. "That lying?" Dan put a hand on my arm. "Sit down." His voice was calm, firm. "Losing your temper now is exactly what she wants." I forced myself to sit, my heart pounding. "So what now?" Harris tapped the table. "Now, we flipped the script." I stared at him. He smirked slightly. "Your wife thinks she's ahead of this. She thinks we're gonna believe her without question. But what she doesn't know," he nodded toward my phone, "is that we have this." Dan folded his arms. "So what do you suggest?" Harris's smirk faded. "We bring her in." My breath hitched. Harris leaned forward. "We let her dig her own grave." And for the first time that night, I felt like I had a fighting chance. Harris wasted no time. He stepped out of the room, made a call, and within minutes, things were in motion. I sat there, my leg bouncing under the table, while Dan remained perfectly still, his face unreadable. "They'll bring her in," Harris said when he returned. "I told them to keep it casual. Act like it's just a follow-up." He gave me a knowing look. "She won't see it coming." I nodded, gripping my phone like a lifeline. Emily thought she had control of the situation. She thought she had set the perfect trap. But now, she was walking straight into ours. And I was gonna watch it happen. We didn't have to wait long. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in an observation room with Dan while Emily was being led into an interrogation room on the other side of the glass. She still had the red mark on her cheek. A fresh coat of mascara, probably to make her look even more broken. She played the role perfectly. Even sitting there, I could see the calculation in her eyes. The way she held herself, small, trembling, but not too much. Just enough to sell the performance. Detective Harris walked in and sat across from her. Casual, relaxed. "Emily, thanks for coming in." She sniffled, offering a weak smile. "Of course. I just want to do the right thing." "Unbelievable." Harris nodded. "Right? So, you said your husband hit you?" She exhaled shakily. "Yes. I've never seen him like that before. He just lost control." "Walk me through it," Harris said, keeping his tone neutral. Emily licked her lips, lowering her gaze like she was gathering herself. "He came home early. I wasn't expecting him. I think he was stressed about work, and when I asked him what was wrong, he just snapped." I clenched my fists. "He grabbed me," she continued, voice shaky, "yelled at me, and then she swallowed hard, reaching up to touch her cheek. "He hit me." Silence. Harris nodded slowly, as if taking it all in. "That's terrible." Emily sniffled. I didn't want to come here, but I was scared." Harris tilted his head. "Scared enough to call Mark Reynolds first?" Emily blinked. What? Harris leaned forward slightly. You called Mark before you called the police. Why? Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Harris gave her an easy smile. You see, Emily, I just like to be thorough. So, we checked the security footage from your house. I saw it immediately, the flicker of panic in her eyes. Harris continued, voice calm, almost conversational. You know what's interesting? That camera caught everything. Even you, pacing in your living room, telling Mark exactly what you were about to do. Emily's breath hitched. That's not. I don't care. I'm saying he hit me. That's what they need to hear. Harris let the words hang in the air. Emily froze. The color drained from her face. Her lips parted slightly, her mind scrambling for a way out. And then, she laughed. A short, sharp sound. Forced. That's out of context. Harris smirked. Oh, really? Then how about we play the whole thing? He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. My phone. With the video queued up. He pressed play. Emily's own voice filled the room. Cold. Unapologetic. It doesn't matter what really happened. If I tell them I was afraid for my life, they'll believe me. I watched her face crumble. For the first time, Emily realized she lost. Harris leaned back, letting the silence stretch between them. So, he said casually, want to try that story again? Emily's breath was shaky. Her eyes darted to the door, like she was calculating her escape. And then, as if a switch flipped, she changed tactics. She burst into tears. The fake kind. Over the top, gasping sobs. I didn't mean it like that, she wailed. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking dramatically. You don't understand what it's like being married to him. Harris's smirk didn't fade. He let her cry for a moment, then leaned in, lowering his voice. That's cute, he said. But here's the problem, Emily. Her sobs hiccuped. You just admitted to filing a false police report. And just like that, Emily's tears stopped. Her hands dropped from her face. Her body went still. She knew. She was screwed. I exhaled slowly, watching her come to that exact realization. Emily thought she could play the system, thought she could ruin me and walk away clean. But now she was the one backed into a corner. Emily sat there, her body rigid, her mind racing. I could see it happening, the calculations, the desperate scrambling for an escape route. But there wasn't one. Harris had her. She had just admitted, on record, that she had lied to the police. And now it was just a matter of how badly she was going to lose. Emily licked her lips, eyes darting toward the door. I was just scared, she stammered. I wasn't thinking straight. Harris sighed, shaking his head. Emily, you walked into this station with intent. You made a formal statement under penalty of perjury. He tilted his head. You do realize what that means, right? Emily swallowed hard. I could almost feel her panic through the glass. And God, I won't lie. Watching her finally suffer the consequences of her own actions felt good. Harris folded his hands on the table. Now, here's the part where I ask you a very simple question, he said, his tone deadly calm. Emily's breathing was shallow. What? Harris's smirk returned. Do you want to make this easier for yourself? Emily hesitated. She knew what he was saying. Lying under oath? That wasn't just messy. That was jail time. Her fingers curled into fists. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't even trying to fake it. She was furious. Not at herself. At me. Like I was the villain in this. Like I had done something to her. And that's when I realized Emily wasn't just a liar. She was a narcissist. She never thought she would lose. Ever. She believed, with absolute certainty, that she could cheat, manipulate, destroy my life, and still walk away clean. And now, that fantasy was crumbling around her. She inhaled sharply, forcing her expression into something hard, cold. I want a lawyer, she said. Harris nodded like he expected that. Fair enough. He stood, motioning toward the door. In the meantime, you're being detained for filing a false police report. Emily's eyes widened. Wait, what? You made a false statement, Harris said, his voice almost bored now. That's a crime. And until we decide what to do with that, you're staying put. Emily shot up from her chair. You can't. The door opened, and another officer stepped in. Ma'am, turn around. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her face burned with rage. She was losing control. And then, she snapped. Her eyes locked onto the glass, onto me, as if she could somehow burn through it. You did this to me, she screamed. Dan smirked beside me. There it is. Emily fought as the officer grabbed her wrists, jerking away like a wild animal. This isn't over, she spat. You think you've won? You think? Her voice was cut off as she was dragged out of the room. Silence. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. Dan chuckled, leaning back in his chair. Well, that was satisfying. I didn't answer. I just sat there, processing. It was over. The trap she set for me caught her instead. Emily was finally going to pay for what she did. But as I stared at the empty chair where she had been, a bitter thought crept into my mind. 5 years. That's how long I gave to that woman. That's how long I built a life with someone who had been capable of this. And now, for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just angry. I was free. The drive home was silent. No calls. No texts. Nothing but the sound of the road beneath my tires. For the first time in hours, Emily wasn't lurking in my mind, poisoning my thoughts. She was in a holding cell, dealing with the mess she created. But even as I pulled up to the house, a thought nagged at me. This wasn't over. Not really. Emily wasn't the type to accept defeat. She was a survivor, a manipulator, someone who could twist reality to fit whatever story suited her. And that meant eventually she'd come back swinging. I parked but didn't get out right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages. Nothing from her, obviously, but one text stood out. Mark Reynolds. Call me. We need to talk. I stared at it for a long moment. Mark, the other half of this betrayal. Emily might have been the mastermind, but Mark, he was the willing participant. The coward who had sat in my bed, in my house, and still had the nerve to warn me about her games like he wasn't part of the reason my life just imploded. I exhaled sharply. My fingers hovered over the call button. I didn't know him anything, but I wanted to know why he was still reaching out. So I pressed dial. Mark picked up immediately. Jesus, man. You finally called. I didn't respond. He let out a tight breath. Listen, I need to explain. No, I said, my voice flat. You need to tell me why the hell you're still calling me. Pause. Then, because I think Emily's coming after me next. I frowned. What? Mark exhaled shakily. She just called me from the station. My grip on the wheel tightened. And she's pissed. At you, at me, at the cops. She said if she's going down, she's taking everyone with her. I leaned back in my seat, processing. Emily was unraveling. She was cornered, and when people like her got cornered, they started lashing out. She threatened you? I asked. Not directly, Mark muttered. But she said. He hesitated. I sighed. Mark. He let out a slow breath. She said she's got stuff on both of us. I scoffed. Oh yeah? What's she got on me? Another silence. Then softly, I don't know, man. But she sounded serious. I stared out the windshield, my jaw tight. Emily was grasping at straws, trying to flip the board before she lost completely. And even if she had nothing, that didn't mean she wouldn't make something up. Mark sighed. I think we both need to be careful. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. You need to be careful, Mark. I'm already ahead of this. Another pause. Then lower. Yeah, guess you are. I could hear something in his voice, defeat. Good. You made your bed, I said simply. Now lie in it. And then I hung up. For the first time in days, I felt like I was in control. But deep in my gut, I knew Mark was right. Emily wasn't done yet. I barely had time to process Mark's warning before my phone buzzed again. Unknown caller. For a second, I debated ignoring it. But something told me I needed to answer. I swiped to accept. Yeah. A beat of silence. Then Emily's voice. You think you've won, she whispered. I closed my eyes, gripping the steering wheel. Of course, she found a way to call. Probably from the station. I'm hanging up, I said. Don't, she snapped. Listen to me. I exhaled sharply, glancing around the empty street. Emily, whatever you're about to say, I don't care. You will, she said, cold, confident, like she hadn't just been caught red-handed, like she still thought she had some kind of control over this. I stayed silent. She took that as permission to keep talking. You're making a mistake. You think you're the hero in this, but you're not. I actually laughed. Oh, I'm the bad guy? That's rich. Emily ignored me. You don't get to just walk away clean. You're forgetting something, babe. My stomach twisted at that word. Babe, like she still thought she could pull the strings. You think I didn't prepare for this? She continued, her voice laced with venom. I knew you'd turn on me eventually, so I made sure I had a little insurance. I stilled. Go ahead, she said. Check your email. My jaw tightened. What did you do? She chuckled. See for yourself. I hesitated just for a second before pulling up my email. There, sitting at the top of my inbox, was a new message from an unknown address. No subject, no text, just an attachment. My pulse pounded as I tapped it. The file opened. A screenshot of a bank statement. My bank statement. And right there, highlighted in red, was a large, unexplained withdrawal. $50,000. From my account. To Mark Reynolds. My breath caught in my throat. What the hell? I stared at it, my mind racing. I never made that transfer. I never sent Mark a dime. But Emily's voice in my ear was smug. Oops, she said mockingly. Looks kinda bad. Doesn't it? My grip on the phone tightened. You faked this. Did I? She cooed. Because to me, it looks like you paid Mark off. Like maybe you knew about the affair all along and used it for leverage. Like maybe this whole thing was a setup to make me look bad. I saw it then. Her new plan. She couldn't frame me for abuse anymore. That failed. So now she was flipping the narrative again. Now she was making it seem like I was the mastermind. That I had been blackmailing Mark. That I had orchestrated this whole thing. I clenched my jaw. No one's gonna believe this. Emily laughed softly. You sure about that? I swallowed hard. Because the truth? I wasn't. Emily was a liar. But more than that, she was convincing. And if she could make the right people believe this, I was screwed that I forced myself to breathe. Gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. Emily had set another trap. And this time it was designed to destroy me completely. She had faked a bank transfer. $50,000 to Mark. She wanted it to look like I had been blackmailing him. Like I had known about the affair all along and was using it as leverage. If she could sell that story, then I wasn't just an angry husband. I was a fraud, a manipulator, criminal. And the worst part? It looked believable. I could already see how she'd spin it. I was scared to leave him. He was controlling. He knew about Mark and used it against me. He threatened me. It didn't matter that none of it was true. Because Emily was dangerous. And she had just shown me that she wasn't done playing her game. I inhaled sharply, steadying my voice. Where did you get that statement? She laughed. Oh, sweetie, you don't get to ask questions. That's not how this works anymore. I gritted my teeth. You faked it. She ignored me. See, the fun part is, I don't even have to prove it's real. I just have to make people doubt you. That's all it takes. A whisper here, a suggestion there. She exhaled dramatically. And suddenly, you're not the victim anymore. You're the monster. I stared at the fake statement on my screen, my pulse pounding. I had to think. Fast. Emily was smart, but she was sloppy when she got desperate. If she faked this, then she had to cover her tracks. That meant there was a way to prove her lie. And then it hit me. The bank. If she forged a statement, then the bank records wouldn't match. And if I got to them before she spread this lie, I could cut her off at the knees. Emily sighed into the phone. So here's the deal, babe. You go along with the divorce. No messy court battles, no exposing me. And in return, her voice softened, sickly sweet. I don't ruin your life. I let out a slow breath. You really think I'm just gonna roll over? She chuckled. I think you don't have a choice. I smiled, because she had just overplayed her hand. If she was threatening me, that meant she wasn't sure she'd win. Which meant I still had a chance to bury her first. I lowered my voice. calm and steady. Emily? Pause. What? I smirked. You just screwed yourself. And then I hung up. 30 minutes later, I was at the bank. Dan was already waiting for me when I arrived. His arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Tell me everything, he said. I pulled up the email. Emily's trying to frame me for bribing Mark. I handed him my phone. Fake statement. Dan exhaled sharply. Jesus. Yeah. We walked inside, straight to the branch manager's office. Dan took over immediately, his tone professional but firm. We need verification on a recent transaction. The manager, a middle-aged man with wire-rimmed glasses, frowned. Which transaction? Dan slid my phone across the desk. This one. The manager adjusted his glasses, scanning the screen. Then he turned to his computer, typing rapidly. The seconds stretched, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then he frowned. He turned back to us. This transaction doesn't exist in our system. I exhaled slowly. Dan smirked. Meaning? The manager sat back. Meaning, this statement is a forgery. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Emily had lost. Dan nodded. We're gonna need documentation proving that. Of course, the manager said, already printing out an official record. And just like that, Emily's last weapon was gone. By the time I left the bank, my mind was clear. Emily had tried everything to ruin me. She cheated. She lied. She tried to frame me for abuse. And when that failed, she went after my reputation. But now, I had all the proof I needed to destroy her first. Dan clapped a hand on my shoulder. You ready for this? I nodded. Yeah. It was time to end this.